one, where do we begin is such a great question, because what politicians talk about is where you're going to end. Right. And that's not the right question. It is what you're asking is where we begin. Although you could say, here's where we want to end, but here's where we're going to start.
I think people say, oh, it's the candidate. We start with the candidate.
Yeah.
But
well, see, I think it's not the candidate. I think it's all of us. I mean, I think it's every single one of us. Donald Trump said again, I alone can fix it. That was the answer. That's not how it works in a democracy. You know, it is all of us that are responsible for it. And we have, I think we lose track of that. You know, I said last night at the dinner in Des Moines that the founders of this country did two really important things. One was they led an armed insurrection against a colonial power. That's called the Revolution. That was a success. Never happened before in human history. The other thing they did was they wrote a constitution that was ratified by the people that would live under it. But they did something terrible as well, which was they perpetrated human slavery, perpetuated human slavery. And it took other Americans to end that, you know. And in my mind, I said last night, Frederick Douglass, who helped lead that and was born a slave in the United States, in my mind is as much a founder as the people who wrote the Constitution. And so are the women who fought, but principally women, to get women the right to vote in this country. They're founders just like the people who wrote the Constitution. And that's not a political statement for me. I actually believe that. And that's what I believe about us, that we have that same responsibility. And so where we have to start, I think, is by creating a constituency in this country to actually make change that we need to make. Mitch McConnell has created a constituency for keeping things the same. We have to create one that is about changing the future of the country, because otherwise that ocean liner is never going to change direction, and it has to change direction. And I do think there's some places we could start. I said last night that I don't believe that the Democrats should be have as one of our principal policy positions Medicare for all. That has dominated our conversation. And the reason I don't believe we should have that is that I don't think our kids have time for us to waste the next 10 years fighting a losing battle for Medicare for all. So that's not where I would start. I would start with the issues I talked about at the outset, which is the fact that people cannot afford to live a middle-class life, and other people can't get out of poverty. Dramatically increase the child tax credit, as I've proposed. We cut childhood poverty in America by 40%, for 3% of what Medicare for all costs, and for less than half of what Trump's tax cut for the rich cost. If we dramatically increase the earned income tax credit, people working today would have more take-home. If we increase Social Security benefits for people that were at the low end, and were poor, that hasn't been done for a long time. That would be an important benefit for the reasons that we talked about people living on a fixed income. I believe we have to transform our education system in this country. If you asked a focus group in America today, what does the Democratic Party stand for on education? What you hear people say is free college. And I can tell you, as a former school superintendent, I'm much more interested in free preschool than I am free college. And I'm a lot more interested in what are we going to do about the 70% of kids who graduate from high school and don't go to college, to make sure when they graduate from high school, they can earn a living wage, not just the minimum wage. That is possible, and it would transform the lives of millions of Americans if we did that. On health care, we do need to cover everybody, and I think we can do it in 3 years with a public option. Mine's called Medicare X. Give everybody in America who's not on private insurance or already on Medicare or Medicaid the chance to have a public option to replace their private insurance if they want it. But if they don't want that, they can keep their private insurance if they have it. And in 3 years, if we did that and auto-enrolled everybody who's eligible in Medicaid or in CHIP, which is the poor kid health program, we'd be covered. But that still leaves a huge problem because our medical costs are so high. And our medical costs are twice what they are in any other industrialized country in the world. And that's what I hear people talking about, is the cost. And having to make choices about buying food and buying drugs and why the drugs are so expensive and all this stuff, which we haven't even really been debating. So So that's a place that I would start. And then I guess I'd add on to that list, getting going on climate change, because that is an existential crisis if we don't deal with it. And the reason I proposed what I proposed on climate is to try to create a new coalition of people that support an enduring answer. So, my suggestion is that we begin to use the working lands of the United States to sequester carbon, pay farmers and ranchers to adopt healthy soil practices, so that we already sequestered 30% of our carbon in the land. We can do a lot better than that, and it would have a lot of side benefits as well. So that's where I would start. And what worries me about Medicare for All, just to take that as an example, it's the best example, is that the opportunity cost that's involved of starting in the wrong place, in a place where you're never in the end going to prevail, and on something that doesn't actually address the central challenges that we have, it's just going to lead to more cynicism, because people are going to say, you promised this, but you didn't deliver it, you promised this, you didn't deliver it, and nothing ever changes, which is what I hear a lot of people say. It just doesn't ever seem to change. It doesn't ever seem to get better. And, part of what we have to learn living in this democracy is that we never really make change very quickly in America. It takes time, it takes iterations, but there are people giving up on our democracy, and we can't do it. Trump is trying to, get people. Every single day when he gets up and smashes the norms of this society. The only way to understand what he's doing, I think, is to just take a glimpse at Roman history. Because at the end of Rome, what happened was these warring dictators, emperors, turned their armies against their own city and destroyed it. And that's what Trump is basically doing. And we're the folks that have to stop him. And then, by the way, that's, in my view, that goes for Democrats, Independents, and Republicans. I had somebody today who's in the last meeting I was in. I didn't have a chance to talk to him, or didn't have a chance to make this point to him, but I'll make it now because I felt bad that I didn't make it. He said he was a Vietnam War veteran, and we talked about that a little bit. And one of the things I've been saying to people in my state is, how did we ever elect a guy who mocked John McCain? Who is a guy who had bone spurs. He said he had bone spurs, couldn't go to Vietnam, and he said, I don't like people that got captured, and mocked McCain. That got repeated on Fox News. That got repeated all over America. And any one of us who had a kid who said that about McCain would, I don't know what you do now in the 21st century, wash their mouth out with soap, or or if you take their cell phone away, or if your parent and grandparent did that, you take their cell phone away. But how did we descend to a level where this is the discourse? It's just not acceptable. And every single day he presents an example for the American people and for our kids and for our grandkids that is just so contrary. Only it is so contrary to our best impulses as a country. So that's, I think, that's my view of how we turn the ocean line around. It's not, you can't turn it around all at once. If you could, you might capsize. But if you could actually begin to make progress and build momentum, I'm extending your metaphor, and at some point you might actually have a wake going behind you as you head toward the beautiful sunset, and it's all good. So or the sunrise, let's say the sunrise. That's what, yes.